Thank you everybody for being here. Seaman Mays has consistently and credibly denied, maintained his innocence, frankly, from the very beginning, well before he ever met any of us. Thankfully, the military judge today reaffirmed that innocence. He based his verdict on the evidence. This is exactly why the Navy provides professional and qualified defense counsel so that innocent sailors don't end up convicted for crimes they didn't commit. This is, in fact, an innocent sailor, and we could not be happier for him. Seaman Mays is going to make a brief statement. He's not going to take any questions. We would ask that you please respect his privacy in the next few days as he begins to move on with his life and rebuild.
I'm so grateful that this is finally over. It's been a long 2 years. I've been waiting a long time. I could say that the past 2 years have been the hardest 2 years of my entire life as a young man. I've lost time with friends, I've lost friends, I've lost time with family, and my entire Navy career was ruined. I am looking forward to starting over. I'm thankful to the judge who heard the evidence and cleared my name. And thank you to those of the media who tried to tell my real story. You don't understand how grateful I truly am. I could not have made it through this without my support of my family, my legal team, and I would ask that you please respect our privacy as we learn to live our lives again in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Seaman Mays, can you at least tell us how you're feeling today, how you were feeling when that verdict was read?
I feel great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Yeah, anybody can talk now that the case is over. The judge instructed the witnesses not to talk until the conclusion of the case. The case is now concluded, so any witnesses or experts could provide statement.
Did you want to say something for us, Gary? Just go ahead and say your name and spell it for the record.
Gary,
a little closer.
Gary Barthel, B-A-R-T-H-E-L.
And your title.
I'm a consultant.
And you were Mays' attorney or defense attorney during the Article 32. You've been sitting through this entire trial. Kind of what are you thinking and feeling today?
Well, I'm thinking and feeling that relief has finally came for Seaman Mays with the judge's findings of not guilty with regard to these allegations. I think it's time now for the Navy to accept responsibility for the fire that was caused in the lower V. As we heard, the lower V became a junkyard, and I believe that throughout this entire process, the Navy was attempting to clean up their mess by accusing Seaman Mays of these allegations.
Do you think there's any possibility of somebody else being in charge in this case, or do you think it's just going to be put out there as an open-ended thing that nobody knows what happened?
Well, if history is any lesson, the Navy has in the past had a hard time acknowledging responsibility for something. I do not anticipate that the Navy will come back and make a conclusion that this was an undetermined cause for the fire. I think the Navy will probably hang on to the belief that this was an arson. But the fact is, Seaman Mays has been found not guilty.
What do you think was a key turning point in this, or key piece of evidence or lack of evidence that?
I think the key evidence in this case was the fact that the defense was able to produce real evidence that countered the government's case. Specifically, the government's case was built on the eyewitness identity provided by Petty Officer Velasco. His credibility was impeached, and I think that the fact that the defense was able to show through other witnesses that Seaman Mays was not wearing blue coveralls that day played a large part in the judge's findings in this particular case.
How closely have you been in contact with him through this whole thing? Were you able to have a moment with him that you could talk about his reaction?
Ryan's reaction in the courtroom is very genuine. He's been under a lot of stress for the past 2+ years while he was named as a suspect in this case. And what you saw in the courtroom with him breaking down emotionally, it was like 1,000 pounds being lifted off his back finally. And he and his family are now able to move on and live their life. Unfortunately, I think his name will forever be linked to this case, but he's determined to move forward and do what he can.
Do you think that the Navy would need major new evidence to charge somebody else in this case?
I don't think that the Navy's going to pursue this any further. Again, I think the Navy's obligation is to look at what was the cause of this fire. The fact that there were hazardous materials stored down in the lower B, that the lower B became a junkyard. I would hope that those would be the lessons learned to avoid future fires like this in the future.
Can Mays stay in the Navy, and can he separate?
Mays, I can't really answer that. I think it's best for him and probably for the Navy that he separate, but we'll see what happens with that.
Are you surprised?
I'm not surprised. I believed he was innocent throughout this entire case.
Were you surprised that the Navy judge would not come in?
No, I think the evidence, in my mind, weighed in favor of Seaman Mays and against the government.
Does this verdict mean that there could be a chance of the U.S. Attorney's Office, pursuing this further, maybe filing charges against other suspects?
I think given the nature of the evidence in the case, I don't see that the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to take this case and pursue prosecution against somebody else. For them to do that, it would be an admission by them that they had the wrong guy all along.
Why do you think it got this far in the first place?
I think it got this far because the Navy is determined to try and hold somebody accountable rather than accept responsibility for their own negligence. I think that this verdict puts pressure on the Navy now to accept responsibility and answer to the American people and to Congress as to what caused this $1.8 billion ship to go up in flames.
Anything else you want to add?
I'm happy for Seaman Mays. I'm happy for his family. I think the defense team did an awesome job in court, especially their closing. They were able to concisely wrap up the evidence that favored Seaman Mays, and obviously the judge agreed with that evidence.
Gary, when this started, Ryan Mays was a cocky 19-year-old. How have you seen him change?
He's obviously much more humble, but as I said from day one, the fact that he was a cocky young sailor doesn't mean that he set a fire on the ship. In fact, it made him a target. But he is much humbler today for having gone through this experience.
And I know it was kind of asked earlier, but he said that his Navy career has been ruined. Do you think that means that he's going to be kicked out, or has he told you that he wants to leave the Navy himself voluntarily?
He hasn't specifically expressed that to me, but I do know that he feels like he's been a victim throughout this process, and that's tainted his motivation and his desire to stay in the Navy. Any other questions? All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
But this is
Thanks,
like
Greg.
all done in terms of...
All done. It's all done. There's not going to be any more trials.
Trials.
Yeah. No.
So
No.
we're not going to see you again?
Not until the next court martial, maybe.